YouTube. There we are. We're going to start in just a minute. Give me a minute. People are still joining in. I think people have started to join. All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Ravina Nimbalkar, and I'm the Executive Director at NAMI Santa Clara County. I'm going to go over some of the NAMI updates. So all our programs have been virtual since the pandemic began. Our warm line, which is now our helpline, is up and running from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Fridays via phone as well as email. Our after-hour family support is available on evenings and weekends. Support groups are all listed on our website, which is www.namisantaclara.org, and offered over Zoom. Our educational classes such as family to family, familiar to familiar, persona to persona, peer to peer, provider education class are all online, and you can contact a helpline number, which is 408-453-0400, and select option number 1. NAMI Basics is on demand and on our website, so you can take it at your own pace, as well as Homefront program as well. Our next FaithNet training is on Thursday, April 28th at 11:30 a.m. And you can contact us on our helpline to get more information or register for it. Our community peer program continues to match us by hospitals as well as self-referrals. I also want to make an announcement about the NAMI Walks. So our NAMI Walks is going to be on October 1st. And we just relaunched our website, which is www.namiwalks.org/Silicon Valley. And you can go and register your teams and get started and get all excited. We're also going to have a kickoff on July 9th, and we're going to make an announcement about that in the coming months as well. I now would like to invite Kathy Forward, former Executive Director of NAMI Santa Clara County and current consultant, to make an announcement. So Kathy, over to you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. And last month we had the election of our new 2022-23 board, and tonight is the official installation. Normally we would be doing this in person. We would have our board members there. You get to meet them all in person, and we get to thank them and even give them a flower or rose, something along that line. But I'd like to announce our board. And so vice presidents, we have Beverly Lozoff, Juan Perez, Frank Aliotto, and Harold Brown. For secretary, we have Peter Newman. Our treasurer is Stephen Wade. Vic Ojakian will be now our past president. Nava Stotman, who's been our past president, will still, I'm sure, be coming to our board meeting. Many of you know Nava. She's been our guiding star for many years, and make sure we stay on track. And we also want to thank Bevan and Vic for sharing the co-presidency these last years. And now I also want to make sure that all of you know that all of our board are volunteers, and they have much passion and devotion for our organization and the work that we do. They have various interests, and they are strong advocates and NAMI leaders. And now I'd like to introduce our new president, Uday Kapoor, and he will say a few words.
Thank you, Kathy, so much. Well, you've also been a guiding star for so many years, and it's so nice that you're continuing to be involved. So thank you so much. And I'm stepping into big shoes, as I was telling some of you. Vico Zakian and Bev Lazoff have been tremendous. And actually, I'm so fortunate that this is one of the most active and well-known NAMI chapters in the state. In fact, we are, being in Silicon Valley, we have tremendous support, and we are fortunate to have so many families that volunteer and are part of it, and they give us feedback. So last few years, I've actually been on the board. I'm not new to this chapter. I've been on the board as Vice President of Supportive Housing, and being a father of a person who has both developmental disabilities and behavioral issues, I understand the issues very well. And I understand the pain of the people in the community. So first of all, I want to thank all the families for being involved and continuing to be active and supporting us. And with that, I would like to thank everyone that has been mentoring me and being part of this family. And I look forward to more activism. And we are facing some very tremendous, challenging times. And with everyone's help, I think we will make an impact and get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you so much, Uday. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to everyone else on the board as well. So now we're going to move forward, and I'm going to introduce the speaker for tonight. The topic for the general meeting tonight is post-traumatic growth, moving forward during life challenges. And our speaker is Sharon Cyrus Saveri, is the director of CA START, East Bay and San Andreas. With years of experience in developing, implementing, and managing mental health programs, she specializes in multidisciplinary approach to treatment that includes positive psychology, strength-based approaches, and trauma-informed care. Her experience includes intellectual and development disabilities, autism, forensic psychology, child welfare, substance use, and family therapy. So I'm going to hand it over to Sharon. And I do want to mention that you can ask your questions in the Q&A section, and also feel free to chat in the chat section. And at the end of the presentation, we'll answer, Sharon will answer all the questions. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Ravina. Thanks everybody for inviting me to be here today. Congratulations to the board. It's really an honor to be here and to talk to you tonight about a topic that's really dear to me. And I will share my screen. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about post-traumatic growth. And this topic has been really very dear to me because I have been humbled and honored to witness people who have had tremendous traumatic experiences who are beyond resilient and are able to thrive and grow and blossom and live very fulfilling lives despite life challenges. And they have always inspired me as a human being to really try to grow daily. They've inspired me as a professional to look into ways in which I can provide more support as I do my work as well. So I'm going to jump right into it, and I hope you have an opportunity to really learn something and share tonight. So before we talk a little bit about post-traumatic growth, it's important that we understand a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder as defined by our diagnostic manual that clinicians use. And clinicians among us will be familiar with this, and those of us who are parents, you'll recognize, and other community people, you'll recognize what's here as well. So most people who have had a very stressful experience, experience what we call intrusion of thoughts. These thoughts are involuntary. It's not willful. They're not trying to think about their trauma experience. It is involuntary. We'll talk a little bit about how the brain works with that in a minute. They tend to have some traumatic nightmares, so reliving those events through flashbacks, and often intense or prolonged distress after exposure to reminders of their traumatic experience. Some people will have some avoidance as well, so they'll try avoiding thinking about it, the feelings associated with their trauma experiences, the people that might have been cause of the trauma or around the trauma, places where the traumas happened, conversation, activities, and situations that may have caused the trauma as well. And of course, there's some cognition and mood changes, as you can see. I'm not going to read everything here because you can all see it, but I do want to talk a little bit about negative beliefs about themselves and the world. That tends to be quite significant for people who've experienced trauma. There's a lot of blame that might happen, self-blame that might happen, or distorted blame that might happen as well. And you might also notice that people have some difficulty in returning to previous level of positive emotions. And we'll dig into that a little bit more as well. And then the last category that typically happens for people who've had a significant stress experience is they can be irritable, very hypervigilant. So the fight, flight, flee response when they're in stressful situations. It's involuntary. It happens. It's the brain's response to that. And they may have problem concentrating, lots of sleep difficulties as well. So many of these things make life really challenging for people who have had a stressful experience. And we live in a world now where almost daily there's something happening that's creating a stress experience for people. Just today, in the city where I'm originally from, you might have read the news where there was quite a stressful experience on the New York City subway as well. We have the pandemic. We have so much going on that's stressful for people. And another thing to note is that complex trauma happens when it is multiple things or repeated exposure to the single trauma. So we have the pandemic that's happening. We have wars that's happening. We have all these violent acts happening around the country. And sometimes it's the same people who are experiencing these events. And 33 to 75% of people who are exposed to multiple traumas end up having a complex trauma experience as well. So at this point in time in my career, the people I primarily support are people with intellectual and developmental disability and autism and their families. And there is quite a bit of trauma that happens for this population as well. In our research through the organization I work, we've noticed that about 80% of the people we support who have IDD or autism has had some traumatic experiences in their lives. So I thought I'd include this for those of us who may be here today, and this is pertinent for you as well. And there are significant studies that have talked about the young people with intellectual disability, and they're 1.5 to over 3 times more likely to have had a maltreated experience in their lives by their peer. That's significantly high. And that starts happening quite young. So you have these young adults and teenagers who are growing up with tremendous trauma experiences. This particular group of people, children and adults, also experience significant social isolation, very stressful family experience trying to care for a child with intellectual developmental disability, co-occurring mental health disorder, not having the resources in the community or sufficient resources or access to the right resources creates tremendous family stress. And oftentimes, people with intellectual and developmental disability and autism aren't able to communicate what's going on for them quite freely. So their expressive skills may be challenging, and so they can't share what might be happening for them. And that increases the risk for more maltreatment and more trauma and more stress as well. Families also experience tremendous financial and psychological stressors, as well as the social isolation as they're caring for their loved one as well. So a couple of studies talked about ASD and trauma, and it's almost a traumatic conditioning process. It's throughout their lives. As you know, people with autism, they have multiple challenges in many areas. If that young person or adult also has a co-occurring mental health disorder, raises the level for them to have developed some significant anxiety as well as many other mental health disorders. That just comes as a result of the trauma they're experiencing in their life as well. The care, again, from the family perspective, and I'll talk a lot about not just the person struggling with a mental illness or co-occurring mental illness and autism or IDD, but also the family, because at the root of what I do is looking at not just the individual treatment, but also how are we supporting families as they're supporting their loved ones as well with mental illness, or their loved one who is experiencing intellectual developmental disability for autism. There's quite a bit of social confusion that happens for people with ASD as well, which can also be very traumatic. That's an area where they struggle quite often. They don't often understand social cues, and that puts them in a position for them to be mistreated as well. There's quite a bit of peer rejection, especially for younger kids and middle school age children as well with autism. There's also a tendency to want to prevent or punish people with autism who have restrictive or repetitive behavior, which is their way of providing balance for themselves. And it's a coping strategy, actually. And when school or the community at large tries to help them to stop them from doing what's soothing for them, that can be very traumatic. And they experience it as somewhat of a punishment as well. And then there are all the sensory sensitivities. Just living their lives, it is amazing. The lights, the sounds, the smells in the community, that can also be quite stressful for these folks. And all of this raises their level of anxiety that really becomes unmanageable many, many times. There's so many people with intellectual developmental disability and anxiety that wind up in the ED because they don't have the most appropriate treatment or access to that treatment in the community. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening in our world today and look at COVID that has happened for almost 3 years now. We're in our 3rd year of COVID. And a few researchers decided to look at what was happening with children. And it was estimated that 40,000 children under the age of 18 years old had lost a parent in between January of 2020 and 2021. That's a lot of children that are now being orphaned, without families, without their caregivers. Very stressful, very traumatic. And this tragedy disproportionately impacts Black children, unfortunately. A lot more Black families and African-American families died during the pandemic. So now you have generations of children who are struggling with PTSD. Some international data also show a very similar trend. and suggests that as many as 1.5 million children worldwide has lost a parent, a grandparent, or an adult caregiver due to COVID-19. So we have a generation of children who are really experiencing tremendous trauma. How do we as parents, as clinicians, as community providers, find strategies to help these pandemic orphans cope with their loss and also grow and find meaning from this trauma? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what all of us as part of the community can be doing to support this particular population, but for anybody who has a mental illness or who has post-traumatic stress disorder. There are also some studies that suggest that parental death can have significant short and long-term consequences for children and adolescents that include traumatic grief, depression, poor education outcomes, and unintentional death or suicide. Suicide rate for children is alarming right now. And the short term is something we can try to do right now. But this long-term impact in their adulthood with serious mental illnesses is something that we will all have to face and figure out how can we provide support now and into the future as well, and perhaps prevent future long-term impact on the lives of these children. Without support and therapeutic intervention, the challenges may persist into adulthood, putting children and adolescents at increased risk for future mental health crises, maladaptive coping, abuse, chronic disease, and poverty. Many of us may know about adverse childhood experiences, and there is a very strong link between experiencing trauma in your childhood and that having biomedical concerns as you get older. So the important thing to note is that we're aware of what's happening. We're aware of what's happening in all over the world with trauma. Clinicians and others are very much trying to come up with strategies and ways in which we can support, build resilience, and provide opportunities for people to develop resiliency as well as experience post-traumatic growth. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I want to pause here a little bit just to talk about, we all come with a measure of resilience in our lives, and we bounce back from adverse experiences. We've all had things happen in our lives that can be very traumatic. But we don't always necessarily need to have had this post-traumatic growth experience, because sometimes it is not as significant because of our personalities, because of the various things that happen in our lives, but we're all resilient. You think of it this way: if we're running and we haven't run for a while, we may have some sore muscles and we may be limping along, and there's some trauma that our muscles is experiencing, and we work our way through it. So we keep massaging it, we run a little bit more, and in a few days, the stress and the trauma to our muscles get better and we're feeling okay. However, if we're running, we tore a muscle, the trauma to that muscle is even more significant. So it's going to take a longer time to heal. And we may need some support. We may need to support some medical support. We may need some physical therapy support. So we need other kinds of support in order to bounce back and to be able to use our legs and our muscles in new ways. And think about that when we talk about resilience. So there's some trauma, but we're able to sort of work through it ourselves. And then post-traumatic growth, where there's a bigger traumatic experience, and we need the support of others to help us to bounce back. So when we talk about post-traumatic growth, we're talking about positive changes that occur after we have experienced a highly stressful event. Some people think of it as growth through adversity that leads to some sort of new maturity, a new way of thinking, a new way of being. Maybe we become more aware of something on the spiritual side, or maybe we become more aware of our relationships, and we'll talk some more about that in a minute. Post-traumatic growth refers to the idea that suffering does not have to debilitate us. In fact, we can find ways to endure and go through that suffering and actually come out with a better outcome, as I just talked about with the example with the muscle. So research suggests that children who struggle with a trauma experience may also experience that post-traumatic growth, that positive change that may include a new appreciation of life, new possibilities, even though they've experienced trauma. A few days ago, I was watching TV and what's going on in Ukraine, and they had all these orphan children in the train station, and they were all trying to figure out what they were going to do. And there were this little boy and little girl who looked at the camera with a big smile on their face and waved. And I marveled that in the middle of a war-torn country, where they now have lost all their parents, these two little kids, couldn't be more than 6, somewhere between 6 and 8. Somehow they were able to smile, and there's some hope there, some thoughts of hope. Somebody's going to take care of them. And it speaks to the wonder of the human spirit and how we're able to bounce back, even in the face of some really egregious situations. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this particular, hopefully you can see all of it. And this, I really love this graphic by Tadashi and Calhoun that talks about the 5 domains of traumatic growth. And while I'm not going to read the whole slide, I want you to look at the middle. And so they did some research and came up with these 5 things that many people decided these were the areas where they felt they experienced some growth after an adverse life event. And so one of them is spiritual development, I accept. The other area was personal strength, I can. The other area they thought was important was close relationships, I cherish. Great appreciation for life, I thank. I'm grateful for things that are now happening. And the other area was new possibility, I dream. And so thousands of people completed the study. And these were the things that people thought they experienced. It's their subjective experience, of course, that they can go through after an adverse life event. And we can all think for a minute, because we've all experienced something in our lives that was an adverse or a challenge or a traumatic experience, and think about where in these domains, and you can have multiple, or you can have one place where you experience something. And just for a minute, think about where did you come out on this domain of post-traumatic growth? You know, when we think of the important things in life and through the research, when people talk about the importance of relationships, the people we cherish in our lives and the impact that has for us, we tend to develop deeper relationships with those people in our lives who we can lean on, rely on, in times of significant stress. People who have had tremendous traumatic experiences are often seeking connection and support and authentic sharing. And sometimes that's family members, sometimes that's friends, sometimes it's through parent support groups, sometimes that's a mental health clinician, but people are always looking for that relationship that can support them through an adverse event. Often those relationships are accepting of who they are. Those relationships allow them to speak their voice and their experience. Those relationships allow them to be vulnerable and share the intimate thoughts and feelings without judgment, so they can experience that unconditional positive regard despite their mental illness, despite what might be going on for them if they have autism or an intellectual disability, regardless of their communication style. People recognize unconditional positive regard. And it really does create that opportunity for change. Reaching out to others is one way in which those who struggle with mental illness often find ways of caring and sharing. As we talk a little bit more about post-traumatic growth, many people experience great resiliency despite their suffering. And they may feel after this experience sometimes more competent and self-reliant as they learn new skills of coping. Many people with severe and persistent mental illness that are often difficult to treat, as they learn new skills, as they learn new ways of coping, they often feel more competent and more like they can rely on themselves to do even the very small things for themselves, and they don't often have to rely on others. There's an increased acceptance of personal flaws and one's own humanity as they're experiencing this post-traumatic growth. We talked about the improvement in relationships as an important factor. Positive realignment of priorities. Sometimes people, when they're experiencing post-traumatic growth, often think about what's most important for me now, despite the struggles, despite what I am experiencing now in life. How can I prioritize what's important for me so I can thrive in the community? Oftentimes there's strengthening of spiritual beliefs or religious beliefs as well. And there's also great appreciation for one's life, especially when you've survived, a tragedy of some sort. There's often this great appreciation for life as well. So let's talk a little bit about what are the ingredients for recovery after an adverse life event. People are always seeking safety, personal safety, physical safety, psychological safety, emotional safety. And so when there's a perceived sense of safety, people are more willing to open up and share. They're more willing to talk about why they may not be medication adherent. They can talk about, how that makes them feel. And that might open up a discussion for a prescriber to think about something else. People who are in recovery often want to feel empowered. And those of us as family members, as clinicians, as community members, can find ways to hear their voice, find ways of allowing them to feel that they're a full participant in their lives, and find ways of helping them to connect to a preferred source of a preferred person, a preferred activity, a preferred clinician, a preferred psychiatrist, a preferred psychologist, but somebody where they can find that connection, because it's in that connection, as we've been talking about, where the recovery process starts happening. So these three things are really quite profound. The research suggests that when these three things happen, people can start that recovery process and experience post-traumatic growth. So what does safety look like? So everybody's sense of safety is subjective, and so we have to respect that. We might think, oh, but you're safe, and we like to tell people you're safe, but it's that person's subjective feeling of safety. So we have to figure out with that person with mental illness, what does safety mean for them? How do they feel safe? And then support that happening for them. It's not enough for us to just tell somebody that they're safe. We have to understand what that means for them and then help them to find ways of experiencing that. Therefore, they need to have understanding and responsive people in their lives. People are going to listen to them. People are going to hear their voice. People are going to acknowledge that what they feel and think and believe are important for them, that they're going to be able to have some discussion around that. Of course, providing comfort, the basic needs in life, food, shelter, and emotional support, we all need that. And that's challenging, I know, especially in California, in the Bay Area. We have so many people who don't have those basic comforts, who are struggling quite a bit with mental illness. And as a community, coming up with better housing, which I know NAMI is, and New Day and many people here, that's a topic that's very dear to your heart. People cannot get well if they don't have their basic needs being met. So all of us are responsible for helping with that. And then there's physical safety from others and self as well, right? So we have those, we all know suicide is on a high. Even now for me, we in my work, we have many 14-year-olds who are high risk for suicide, not just ideation, but actual gestures. So finding ways to help them stay safe, and giving them the tools they need to communicate when they're not feeling safe, so that we can support them and prevent them harming themselves, and keeping them safe in the community as well. We've talked quite a bit about dialogue and connection and talking and hearing their voice, making sure there's that safe person. We all have safe people in our lives, that person that you trust, that you will share anything with. People with mental illness also needs a safe person that they can talk to, and that will help to support them regardless of what's happening. And the ability to get emotional, social, and their physical needs met is quite important in terms of helping people with mental illness thrive in their lives. So what are the keys to empowerment? So we just talked about safety, empowerment, and connection. So now we'll look at empowerment. And one of the real keys here is real choices. You know, sometimes people with mental illness don't have a real choice. They get what we give them. They get what society offers. And like everybody else, they want to have some real choices as well. So finding opportunities to give them a chance to have a say in what happens in their lives. Real input into daily life, hear their voice, hear what they need, what they want, and to the best of our ability, try to make some accommodations. We often know that those who are seriously and persistently mentally ill often need quite a bit of support, but even with that support, hearing them is important. being listened to and being asked questions such as, what is bothering you? So demonstrating that care and concern and that compassion. How are you feeling? Tell me what's going on. What do you think you should do? We take these questions very lightly, but you would be surprised at how many people who need support have never heard anybody ask them these questions. And there are some assumptions that we all make about what might be going on with them. But the key to empowering them, to sort of give them an opportunity to claim some of their lives, is asking a few of these very simple questions that opens up the dialogue so we can hear, understand, and provide the best support or access to the best supports that they might need. So let's talk about some of the key to connection. And we've talked, there's a trend, as you will notice in each of the categories. The relationship is important, listening is important, consistency is important. People who have mental illness or ID or autism need predictability, they need consistency, and all of us need to think about that for them. I know sometimes it's difficult. We're all having, many things going on, but this particular population of people need some predictability and consistency in order for them to thrive. So when we can provide as much of that as possible, that will help us building connections. Watching our body language, watching their body language. Body language is 80%, 90% of our communication. So just being mindful of how we show up when we're engaging with them, when we're connecting with them, because they're very keen at reading our own body language. Our words don't matter if our body language communicates that they don't matter. Providing eye contact, and we have to think about that culturally, right? So there are folks who don't like eye contact. There are some people with autism who may not like that, but then there are others who, when you make eye contact with them, they know that you've seen them. Reflecting, saying back what you're hearing, saying the last several words, acknowledging that their voice is being heard, paraphrasing and summing up what you're hearing so they can correct you if you're wrong, and they can read, so you can really connect with them of what's bringing meaning for them. And we talked about asking the right questions, the how questions, the what questions, questions that's going to have them sharing more about what's going on in their inner world or what's going on in their lived experiences, versus questions that will get yes or no answers. And then being responsive and listening even to their non-verbal input as well. So as part of my work with positive psychology, which is really trying to look at what's strong with folks and strengthening that. Yes, acknowledging the challenges, but also looking for opportunity to help people with mental illness, help people with autism and ID to develop a strong positive identity. And why do we want to do that? Because typically they're not the person who gets the job because of their struggle. They're not the person who gets married, even though they want that as much as everybody else does. They're not the person who drives the car. They don't have that similar developmental milestones like everybody else. They're not the person for our teenagers that is in the high school sports team and is popular with everybody else. They're not the cool one. So when they experience all those things that they're not, it really adds to their level of not feeling connected to the world and to the people around them, adds another level of anxiety and depression and all of that for their lives. And so given that people that we're talking about today experiencing all of that, we want to help them to develop more positive identity. So we want them to start thinking about, who am I, right? And give them some language to start talking about who they are. what are their strengths, what are their skills, what are their preferences, so that they can begin to have that positive sense of who they are. What do they do well? So do some strength spotting, doing some kudos for things that people do well. Who are their friends, and help them to develop friendships with the people around them. What are their preferences, and trying as much as possible to include preferences in their lives on a daily basis. And where can they make a difference? Everybody wants to make a difference. All of us want to be altruistic. All of us want to give back. Finding even very small ways in which people with mental illness and ID and autism can make a difference, and spotlighting that and cheering it on is important. And what am I proud of? Helping them to identify their accomplishments, the things that they can do well. And it begins to reframe all the things that they can't do, and they can start thinking about all the things that they are able to do. It helps them to highlight all their wonderful strengths, gifts, and abilities, which then helps them to thrive, which then helps them to move beyond resilience and experience post-traumatic growth. So what are just a little bit more research on some of the predictors of post-traumatic growth, things we've talked about, caregiver warmth and coping advice, such as positive reframing. You know, people I support who sometimes are in group homes, care homes, and these are the people with co-occurring mental health disorders and ID. People tend to have very negative narrative about them. Oh, they're bossy, they're controlling, they're seeking attention, they're manipulating. And I often find opportunity to say, oh, sounds like this person has leadership skills when people tell me that they're bossy. And reframe from a positive perspective what might be going on for that person. When somebody tells me somebody's attention seeking, I'm like, sounds like Sharon might be seeking connection. Is there anybody here that she can spend some time with, do something with? Or when they say, oh, Sharon's manipulating, sounds like she's a good advocate for what she needs. So providing ways in which we can start reframing some of the ways in which people see people with mental illness, and really allowing them to thrive in their own lives and begin to see themselves as a leader, see themselves as advocating for their needs, see themselves as seeking attention as well. Social support is important. We've talked about that. Positive relationships is one of the big keys to post-traumatic growth in most studies. Some studies didn't find it to be as important, but many studies said social support was key to experiencing post-traumatic growth. And then positive coping, of course, a positive reinterpretation of what might be happening for the person is also very much instrumental in what might happen. And I can share a personal story. A number of years ago, traveling and lost my vision, total loss of vision in my right eye. Got back to America, had a whole bunch of tests, only to find out that I also had an aneurysm, which did not cause my losing my vision. But because I lost my vision, we were able to deal with the aneurysm, and I'm alive and well today. And so I often have a very positive reinterpretation of me having this very traumatic experience of being in a foreign country, not being able to see, but I'm grateful that I lost my vision, because then we found the aneurysm and I'm alive today because of it. So there are times when this growth experience, out of this negative experience, a negative trauma experience, we also can find some good. The gratitude in being able to live our lives. A little bit more about strength of character. And there's a great article which I can share with everybody. If anybody wants it, they can let us know and I'll make sure I pass it along. That looked at 1,739 adults and really found that there was a positive association for people who had experienced traumatic events, who also were able to experience growth based on using positive psychology, mythology of strength spotting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So this is positive psychology, the tenets of positive psychology, which is called PERMA. And PERMA stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And so what the founders of positive psychology and those who practice this have found is that positive emotions are an essential part of our well-being. Happy people look back on the past with gladness, look into the future with hope, and they enjoy and cherish the present. And so as we support our loved ones, or as we support our clients, or as we support the community, and trying to find opportunity where we can experience positive emotions, people tend to experience post-traumatic growth. When people are engaged in their lives and doing things that bring flow for them, that hobby, you know, those things that brings them joy, those places that bring them joy. When they experience flow, people experience post-traumatic growth. And we've spent a lot of time talking about relationships, meaning we're at our best when we dedicate our time to something greater than ourselves. It could be our faith, it could be community work, it could be family, politics, a charity, a profession, or a creative goal. When we're engaged in meaningful endeavors, we experience what's called PERMA, and our well-being increase. And so finding opportunities for the people in our lives with mental illness and ID and autism to engage in things that brings them meaning will go a very long way in them being able to thrive and experience well-being in a whole new way. And we talked a little bit about accomplishments as well. Everybody needs to win, everybody needs to achieve something, and finding the small wins that leads to the bigger wins is also an important part of supporting people who may need to experience this post-traumatic growth, who do need to experience post-traumatic growth, who do need to move beyond resilience and enjoy other parts of their lives. A little bit more about the pandemic and the orphanhood. We really want to make sure that and we also have all these orphans in the Ukraine, and really thinking about what trainings, what groups, what supports we can put together as part of the community to make sure that people experience the growth. I'm not going to read the slides because we've talked quite a bit about this and it's included, and I can share the PowerPoint at the end if anybody needs it as well. So what do we know? We have the extraordinary ability to translate trauma into growth. We can develop skills and adapt after grief and loss. Many of us need outside support in order to learn new coping skills. And when we do, we can thrive in our lives. We're never alone. And that once we have strategies, we can adapt, we can learn, we can grow, and we can overcome significant trauma events. So post-traumatic growth is definitely tied to our brain, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about brain plasticity, but we have this fantastic organ called our brain that is impacted by a trauma event and can shape our lives very negatively. But with support and all the things we've talked about, it can be rewired. And our brain is so plastic that we can learn and grow despite all the things that has happened in our lives. And that's such an important thing for us to recognize. And there are many ways, many pathways to helping the brain to build new neurons and to develop ways in which to cope and overcome. And some of us might know Bessel van der Kolk. And he has come up with ways about yoga, about drama therapy and neurofeedback therapy, psychodrama, therapeutic massage. There are many ways, many therapeutic modalities that will help with neuroplasticity and help our brains to develop new ways of coping, new ways of seeing things, new ways of experiencing our lives after a traumatic event. And then this slide is a little busy, so we're going to take a minute to talk about it. I'm almost at the end. And as you will see, it's measuring the resilience level. And after a post-traumatic experience, there's a bit of a decline. And you'll see that on the red line. So we've faced some sort of adversity. And life as we know it has changed. And so things are not the same it used to be. And then we start climbing with some support, right? So we're in survival mode where we're still sort of anxious. We're still sort of worried. Our sleep might be impacted. We may not be so self-confident, but over time, we start adapting and we start learning and we start recovering. We have new habits that we have learned. We have new ways in which we're even kind to ourselves, having increased empathy for ourselves. And we're curious as we grow about what else can we do in our lives to increase our ability to thrive, to increase the opportunity for karma, right? Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishments. We really start enjoying some of that. And then we start experiencing some growth, right? With all that support, start believing in ourselves, start developing better relationships, start having that meaning and perspective, becoming more self-aware about what's going on for ourselves and why we need what we need in terms of all the supports we have in our lives. And quite a few people helped with putting this presentation together. These are all the references. There's quite a bit of research out there on post-traumatic growth. And thank you for listening. I hope this was beneficial. And I don't know if there are any questions. So Ravina, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sharon. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, and I don't see any in chat as well. And if you want, you can just raise your hand and you can ask questions. I can enable your speaker. So let me know if you just raise your hand if you have a question, or you can put in the chat or Q&A.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Brian.
I think Sharon probably got cut off. I'm hoping she'll be back. Okay, somebody is asking, so once Sharon is back, I'll let them know that about getting the PowerPoint presentation. Anju. We're still waiting for Sharon to come back. Meanwhile, Kathy, did you want to go ahead and make the announcement while Sharon comes back? I think she kind of, I think she was bumped out of Zoom.
Okay. So once again, I want to congratulate our new board. I forgot to mention that we have 2 people who are members at large. These are not elected positions. They're appointed by president. And so Karen DeLumi and Maureen Milo are members at large. They're also a very important part of our board. They're voting members. And again, I want to just say thank you to all of them. And congratulations, and we look forward to working with you this next year.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy. I think there are some comments in the chat that I see about asking for the PowerPoint presentation. So I'll surely, if Sharon doesn't come in the next couple of minutes, then we'll just end this. But I will definitely ask her to send it. And then if all of you can send me an email, whoever wants the presentation. I believe you all have my email because the Zoom was sent by me. And so there should be an email at the end. Just send me an email and I'll send out the PowerPoint presentation whenever I have access to that. And I can also put my email ID here if just for everyone. So you should have my email here. Should be an email, and once I get access to the PowerPoint presentation, I shall get it to you. Okay, it looks like there is a question in the Q&A, but Sharon's not here. Maybe some issue with the internet. So yeah. Okay, I think Sharon's back. She's joining, so we'll wait a couple of minutes.
Sorry about that.
All right, Sharon, welcome.
I'm in the hotel and the light just suddenly flickered and my computer shut down.
That's okay. That's okay. So there have been a lot of thank yous and everyone loved the presentation. I think a few people have asked for the presentation. So I suggested that maybe you send it to me and then whoever sends me an email, I'll just forward that presentation to them and we can take it from there. I see there is a question in the Q&A and the question is, how can one find support in this area for their loved one?
In which area? In the Santa Clara area?
I'm not sure. Heidi Alexander asked this question. So,
so if she's talking about in the geographic area, right? There depends. There's Hope Services.
You're saying yes, Santa Clara County.
Yes. So there's Hope Services that provides quite a bit of mental health support for folks as well. Uday is there. I'm not sure if Uday can jump in and share a little bit about Hope Services, but I know they provide quite very good behavioral health support in that area. Uday, do you want to sort of chime in to answer that question?
And I think he did
He's
raise.
gone.
Yeah, I think he's raised his hand. He's logged in under my name, so it shows my name. So I was like, oh, I did not raise my hand here. Okay.
Heidi, I would reach out to Hope Services.
Yes, everything on the outside.
So then you hear.
Are you speaking with me?
Might be. See.
Maybe there's somebody else in the community who may
Yeah.
know of something who can also chime in
Yeah.
and raise their hand.
Yeah, so if you can hear me?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you there.
Yeah, I just unmuted. So yeah, Sharon, you're right. Hope Services is a great organization for support. I think if the support they're asking for is for people with intellectual disability and mental illness, that's an area which we are actually very actively working on through a symposium that was held 6 months ago. And then there was a follow-up symposium happened on April 1st. And this has been brought the attention to the higher authorities, and everybody acknowledges that this is something that is not been supported too well, because there are, Department of Development Services and Department of Social Services, and there's not too much interaction between them. But Hope Services is a great organization to help out. So this is one, yes. And then, of course, YAI, which is an organization from New York that Sharon is part of, and they have an organization called CalStart, which is the entity that has been licensed by the regional centers to support people with intellectual disabilities and mental illness. And so they currently have to be clients of the regional center, but we are working on an initiative for people outside the regional center. So
Thank
those
you.
are my comments.
Okay. Yes,
Thanks, Uday. Thank you so much.
thank you.
All right. Anyone else with a question? Or, okay, let's see, there's one more. Okay, there's another question. Do you have advice about how to proceed if the person is feeling stuck in their hopelessness and the only positive connection is to therapist? The trauma is related to lack of understanding from their family, and they truly do not enjoy anything.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Sounds like this person may really be going through a period of depression. And really, even though they're only connected to the therapist, perhaps family therapy might be something that's useful. So the goal of family therapy would be then to bridge that gap between the therapist and the person and increase that positive relationship between the family and the person. So that could be one area as well. Providing maybe a social group, and maybe sometimes that's one person in the community, helping the person that you're saying that they're not connected to anything. They're not enjoying anything right now, but if you can think of things that they've enjoyed in the past and try to reintroduce some of those things into their lives, and you may have to keep trying, you may have to, try again, consistently trying, because that initially they may not be responsive to that, but don't give up, keep trying and connect them to things that brings meaning for them. Sometimes that's a support animal that's bring meaning for a person. Sometimes it's an instrument. It could be anything, a variety of things, but think about what brings meaning for that person and introduce that to them. I hope that's helpful. And, talk to the therapist about expanding. Maybe group therapy might be something to open up their circle as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. Anyone else? Okay, then I think that's about it.
That's about it. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank the community for welcoming me to share my thoughts with them today. And I look forward to continuing to participating in the conversation. And maybe I'll even, who knows, maybe I'll be part of the upcoming events and the walk and all of that as well.
That'd be great. But thank you so much, Sharon. Really, really appreciate you coming in tonight, even though you're traveling. And the presentation was so helpful and really, really, informative for us. So thank you for sharing all that knowledge with us. And we'll see you soon.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Please do email me if you need a presentation.